Capital is abundant. Understanding is scarce. The Dynamo Show goes deep with the new industrialists rejuvenating industry and commerce. Brought to you by Dynamo Ventures. Learn more at dynamo.vc/podcast. Now, here's your host, Madeline O'Farrell.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Dynamo Show. I'm your host, Madeline O'Farrell, and I'm excited to be joined by Dynamo portfolio company founder, Bobby Healy today. Bobby, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Bobby, you're building a business called Manna. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about what Manna is up to?
Yeah, so Manna, we design and build autonomous electric aircraft, otherwise known as drones. And we operate them. We're licensed by FAA and EASA over in Europe to fly them beyond visual line of sight to deliver from A to B for various different operators, including DoorDash, Uber Eats, and many others. Mostly we're flying takeaway food, but we also do hardware store, bookstore, everything you might want delivered in your suburban community, we fly it.
Amazing. And you've done about 300,000 drone deliveries today, if I recall correctly. And you've been able to do that with a 90% sort of availability in Irish weather, no less, which is not necessarily known for drone-friendly skies. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to actually make drone delivery work commercially?
Yeah, so it's 97% available in Ireland, which is very difficult. Obviously, Irish weather, it's a small island on the coast of the Atlantic. It's brutal weather. To make it work commercially, to make it commercially viable, you have to think like a low-cost airline. It's not, you don't think like SpaceX or Tesla, you think like a low-cost airline, because most of your cost is in lack of utilization. So underutilizing the asset, underutilizing the people that are responsible for the asset, just like a low-cost airline. So for us, we've been flying just over 6 years now commercially, actually closer to 350,000 flights. And we've optimized to the end every single part of that operation. So it's not just autonomous aircraft, it's the fact that when the aircraft lands back at one of our bases, it's back up in the air with another parcel or cargo within 30 seconds. So that, turnaround time, that very efficient use of the real estate that we might be using for one of our bases is critical. And it means that we can do 8 deliveries per aircraft per hour. And if you look at the rest of the industry, no one's doing even over 2, and we're getting 8 deliveries an hour. So it is about optimizing throughput, being able to manage high throughput, being able to optimize all the costs around that to get your unit cost down, and therefore achieve what we have, which is positive contribution economics. So we'll be able to scale a positive number rather than scaling a negative number. And I think that's pretty important in this industry, because it's a low cost industry. Delivery, logistics, particularly of low cost items, is a low margin business. So there isn't a lot of room for a ton of capex, a ton of waste, anything like that. So it has to be incredibly efficient from the get-go. And that's what we've been focused on for close on 6 years now commercially. We're 8 years old as a company and 6 years flying.
And I want to talk a little bit about a major announcement that Manna's had recently, that you're leaning hard into the US market. Now, historically, you've been explicit that you won't enter the US in a meaningful way until the regulatory environment is kind of approachable and allows you to do so. And so what happened, or what changed in the environment that caused that shift?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been a US company. We've always wanted to be the leader in the United States. It's the biggest market in the world for this. So it's not that we've said, hey, we're European, we're going to one day enter the USA market as an afterthought. All of our energy has been around getting a scalable, safe platform ready and getting ready to win, being match fit to win in the USA. And we haven't wanted to waste precious resources or precious time waiting for regulatory progress there, because we've had great regulations in the other parts of the world that have allowed us to scale in ways that we would not have been able to scale in the United States. Well, just over a year ago, the White House signed an executive order to unleash American drone dominance, and that was the title. And with that came an accelerated path to regulatory clarity in the United States, most notably the Part 108 regulations. And with those set of regulations and rules comes a very, very clear digital access to the airspace for exactly companies like us. So it creates a federal, totally across the USA, set of rules and guidelines for the FAA to implement and local cities to work with to allow us to scale without any friction. So that executive order happened. Because of that, the Part 108 regulations were published, the NPRM, the notice for proposed rulemaking was published, all the comments have been in, and the timeline is very rapid. We expect those 108 regs to come out end of this year. And that really is the reason we've just completely pivoted all of our energy to the United States. I've moved here now. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma at our test site. Our HQ for operational is all in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we'll be live in about a week's time flying here commercially. And we have about 10 new locations across the city, going to go live in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And thereafter about 30 locations. And those 30 locations is the entire city of Tulsa. So it's the first citywide network, or mesh as we call it, of drone delivery. And all of that's been enabled by simply the political will in the United States to push forward to enable this industry. Because again, if you look at China, you look at the war in Ukraine, you look at geopolitics, the USA is about to catch up, if not overtake the rest of the world in this industry. So now is the time to start growing here, and that's why we're here.
And what was it about Tulsa, Oklahoma specifically that made you decide to launch your base from there?
It's kind of a Goldilocks city for us. It's just over a million, 1.1 million people, about 400,000 households, all very suburban, dense suburban. So operationally, a nice footprint that we like and we could implement in a few months. And then second to that, it's got a huge aerospace ecosystem here, surprisingly. A lot of very big aerospace companies here. So an ecosystem of manufacturing, high quality components, things like that. So all of our components are sourced in the USA. High quality aerospace grade components, and that's important. And then notably, the governor of Oklahoma, the state itself, has a big intentions on aerospace and drone technology, specifically drone manufacturing. And then within the state, the city of Tulsa has invested heavily in airspace tools, so like radar systems, the safety system, which lets us fly and clear the airspace of non-transponding aircraft. There's a lot of kind of technical airspace things that would generally trip you up in a smaller city like Tulsa, but that the city has gotten behind and has stated very clearly that they want to be the #1 drone capital of the United States. So we just know this is the right home for a drone delivery company. Both our manufacturing and our operational HQ will be here. All our remote pilots will be here. And then I'm here and leadership team are here as well. So it's just been a red carpet rolled out for this industry in Tulsa and Oklahoma. And you go where you're welcome, very, very welcome. And it's very clear that this state and the city wants to be a leader in the industry.
Amazing. You're entering the US market where a variety of well funded competitors are currently operating, Google's Wing, for example, or Zipline. How do you think about competing against those players? And is there anything about your operating history in Ireland and across Europe that you think gives you an edge?
It's funny, we don't really see them as competitors. They're awesome companies, Amazon as well, I could throw in there. There's a bunch of others. Look, it's an industry that's today just been born. It's a nascent, airspace. Today, there's about from the top 2 companies, about 3-4 billion deliveries a year in the United States. It's gonna be a long time before one company is going to dominate 4 billion deliveries a year, and that's growing at 15% organically. And with drone delivery, it's probably going to triple because the product is so much better than road-based delivery. So I'd be very happy to just do 1 billion deliveries and let my competitors have the rest of them. This is an industry where everyone that can scale safely and with positive margin is going to be a winner. There's not going to be a dominant player here. It's just impossible. The better way to think about it is the advent or the start of the airline industry here, low cost airline industry, even where you'd have 5-10 players that are all regionally focused and they're growing operational footprints and they're doing a great job and there are different degrees of profitability. And it's going to be the same in our space because it's a CapEx intensive space. It's boots on the ground, it's manufacturing, it's maintenance, it's operations. It's not SaaS. It's not marginal cost of zero or marginal effort of zero to deploy a new product. It's heavy lifting. So, that's the way I think about it. I applaud, Zipline, I applaud Wing. They have different visions than we do. I applaud Amazon because we're all ultimately in the same game, which is giving the customers a magical delivery experience that works really well. A 3-minute flight in our case, making it reliable, making it almost inconsequentially cheap to get stuff delivered, and just creating jobs in local businesses. I mean, the local bookstore we have, in Tulsa is going to beat Amazon for delivery times. So like, this is about, for us, empowering communities, empowering cities to thrive with logistics. It isn't catching rockets. It's absolutely not rocket science here. It's just about delivering scale in an operationally efficient way. And so honestly, I wish them all the best of luck. If I had a big red button to switch them off, I wouldn't press it. I always say, I think they're doing a great job. All the action right now is in DFW mostly. But for us, Oklahoma is just as good a home as anywhere else. And so look, we all have differences in our technology and our product and our approach to it. We're lesser funded. We've, raised only $110 million. All the others have spent billions on their platform. And, that doesn't make them better or worse. It probably just makes them more comprehensive and more, industrial scale. But, I'm a founder of companies before. It's not the biggest company with the biggest balance sheet that always wins if there is a, head-to-head fight. And anyway, there's not going to be a head-to-head fight. It's going to be, every one of us is going to be probably overlapping in the same cities in some different way, serving different supply side partners, but all serving the same set of households. We're not competing for the households. We're not competing for the supply side partners because there's so many. We're really competing for balance sheet and profitability. And on that part, I feel very confident that we're in a very strong position.
Absolutely makes sense. And your point that it's not a winner take all market is well made.
No.
One of the compelling characteristics of the US market that you've talked about is that the aggregators, i.e. the DoorDashes and the Uber Eats of the world, have consolidated the market in a really attractive way. What exactly does the kind of aggregator partnership really entail, and why is it the best go-to-market strategy for Manna?
Yeah. So aggregation is a product for consumers. Consumers aren't going to go direct to 50 different restaurants that they know, 50 different vendors that they know. It's like very clear: Amazon, DoorDash. Aggregation is a massive network effect play, and DoorDash are mature, Uber Eats are mature. I would say there's some play still to go there between the top two, because there's certain cities that they're still battling in, and then Amazon are who Amazon are. And you've got Walmart as well that are relevant in a different way, and many others. So for us, we think, look, we don't want to build a consumer brand. We don't want to compete with our very own partners. We don't want to own customer data. We don't want any of that. What we want to do is be the number one company to move products around safely for everybody. And if you think about efficiency, if you think about the marketplace or the hierarchy of value, logistics is very close to the actual product in terms of value to the consumer, because the consumer needs the product and it needs the product delivered. Everything else above it is very important to the consumer: aggregation, transacting, loyalty, discounting, all that stuff. But if you look at the cost of providing logistics, it's actually the capital cost and the actual operational cost of operating a fleet. And your margin improves by making that fleet better utilized or increasing your utilization. And the way you increase your utilization is you serve all demand out of one physical location. So if there's a brand X, very well-known burgers and fries restaurant, and they're in one location, it makes absolutely no sense for them to have a relationship with one channel of distribution that operates a drone fleet that doesn't, it's not able to operate across all other channels of distribution, across competing aggregation channels, across direct brand business. So it makes sense that actually the logistics is common across all channels and is wrapped around the physical infrastructure, which is the restaurant or the strip mall or the dark kitchen or wherever it is. So we think that actually we're in a very strong position as an industry, as all drone delivery operators, depending on our strategy. We think actually there's a strength and there's a moat there in becoming meaningfully important to both the aggregator layer and the direct layer, which is what we're doing. And we've done really well in Ireland. We were live with all three aggregators in Europe where we operated, and it just worked really well, because in the end, aggregators won't be differentiated by the travel, right? So the customer doesn't care which car the product is delivered in or which drone the product is delivered in. They really don't care. They just want the hamburger, they want the book, they want the drill bit, whatever it is. So there's no differentiator there for aggregators to compete with each other. The real issue will be if aggregator A has drone delivery and aggregator B does not have drone delivery, aggregator B is out of business. And that's a fact because we've seen the take up rate. We're in 90% adoption rate in some parts of Dublin where we operated, and on average blended about 62% across all of our operational areas. It's extremely popular. And when people use the service, they never go back to road-based delivery, because why would you go back to road-based delivery? Why would you wait half an hour, 40 minutes for your French fries when you can get them in 3 minutes? So there's a thing here where the aggregators must have drone delivery or they're not going to keep those customers. And we just want to get out of the way and power that for all of them.
That's fascinating. Thinking a little bit about the road ahead, you said that you want to target about 2 million annualized deliveries by the end of 2026 and launch, I believe it's 6 additional US cities by the end of 2027. What does that operational playbook for launching new cities really entail?
Yeah, so city is the unit of work. So when we think about scaling, by the end of this year, we'll have one full city implemented, which is Tulsa. We have a footprint in DFW as well. And for the next 6 months, we'll just saturate that. It'll take us 6 months fully to have all of the bases live, throttled up and demand, adoption all the way up. So when you think about a city like Tulsa, the things in common are, look, you need a flight testing range because you're going to be doing maintenance centrally in the city. And when you maintain an aircraft, you need to fly it, right? So maintenance, operation, flight testing facility needs to be in every city. And that's really it. Then we have a ground team that do real estate partnerships or commercial partnerships. Sometimes they're the same thing. And we're just signing up bases. And it's quite a digital exercise. We'll ingest all of the data on housing locations, on supply locations, on, footprints where we think make the most sense to distribute the fleet around the city. And we want that to be a mesh so that, we can fly 6 miles that way and 1 mile back this way. So in other words, the deadhead flight where we might have to do, go out and come back, we won't do that. We'll go out as far as we want and then go back to maybe a closer landing pad somewhere else. So that's what we mean by a mesh. That just optimizes the network. It means that you're really flying, 80% of your flight is with cargo. The other 20% is on the way back. And you want that footprint in the city to be, well thought out. And so that's the unit of work. And that probably takes us we've been on the ground about 4 weeks now in Tulsa. We'll have 10 bases live in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So that's 2 months start to finish. And then the rest of the city takes another 3 to 4 months, I think. And then if you think about that in parallel, from 2027 onwards, we want to do about 10 cities. And we know probably where half of those are. We've already done the work on them. We'll identify the rest of them throughout the rest of 26. So think about 27. By the end of 27, we'll go from 2 million deployed capacity at the end of 26 to hopefully about 10 to 15 million by the end of 27.
Amazing. And in order to achieve that goal, you recently raised $50 million in funding. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that fundraise kind of helps you along the path of achieving your vision of air delivery being the infrastructure of everyday life?
Yeah, well, capital's the lifeblood of a company like us. We've intentionally focused on perfecting a singular operation, one city up to now. So we've never really chased revenue, topside revenue. So we're obviously going to rely on venture capital to power the business, and will do for quite some time. With the 50 million allows, that tops us off at the 110 million so far. That allows us to hire more engineers for our next phase of development on aircraft. So we have 2 more products coming along, as well as some very exciting ground-based technology we're developing. So more investment in R&D to help us from 27 onwards, just do a better and better job for our customers. And then the other biggest use of capital is actually just operationally scaling. So we're increasing the size of manufacturing. We're putting manufacturing right here in Tulsa for the aircraft we use in the United States. And so it's going to be capital deployed to hire those people on the ground here, the remote pilots on the ground, the maintenance engineers, and everything that, comes with running an airline, because there's an significant upfront cost around creating that operation and getting it ready to generate revenue. And so there's a latency in that cash coming in, and raising 50 million gives us the breathing space we need to grow.
And as you look ahead, call it 10 years from now, what does the world look like, particularly in the US, given the focus? What does the world look like if Manna executes?
I think in 10 years, I'd be absolutely certain that every city in the USA will have drone delivery as the predominant means of delivery for the last mile. Certainly for small, I think 5 to 8 pounds of cargo. The only way you're going to get that in a suburban context is with a drone, because it's just so much more effective. It's such a better experience. Your food's hot, whatever, it's just faster. And we think that the marginal cost of drone delivery goes to less than 50 cents, as compared to over $10 for road-based delivery. So just economically alone, it's just, 10x better than the existing mode. And it's more scalable because you don't need to have gig economy labor. Like, one of our employees can do 20 deliveries an hour, loading cargo onto an aircraft, versus a gig economy driver driving a car can do 1.8 deliveries per hour. So for all sorts of reasons, cities, states, the country will lean on it, as will the consumers, as will small businesses, as will big aggregators. So there's no doubt about that. And the only question I have is, will we also be flying heavier cargo? Will you be getting your weekly, shopping goods, with this type of technology or not? I think the answer to that is likely you will be, because I think even though we've all focused on relatively light aircraft now with pretty, modest cargo capacity, I do think that it's kind of a linear thing to scale that aircraft up and to carry 50 pounds, 100 pounds rather than 5 to 8 pounds. So 10 years time, every single suburb, there's 92 million suburban homes in the United States, detached, single family homes. We think probably 70 to 80 million of those are viable for drone delivery. And I think that will take 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely makes sense. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective today, and excited to see a future where we see Manna drones across the US.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And to our Dynamo Show listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked. And be sure to head over to podcast.dynamo.vc to keep up to date with our latest content, or subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Until next time.